Hello, welcome to this session on what is true multi-tenancy. My name is Raj Nair. I am from Avesha. So in this session, we're going to start off with what is the definition of a tenant and why multi-tenancy is not inherent in Kubernetes. So just to make sure that we are clear about that, then what is the need for this? What is the business value? Why do we need multi-tenancy and to be competitive in the B2B SaaS marketplace? And what is not true multi-tenancy? So we'll make sure that we understand to differentiate what is the meaning of true multi-tenancy and why that will give you a competitive advantage. And then we talk about this concept of application slicing, which allows you to define a true multi-tenancy as a construct that then we will apply to different use cases and in the area of modernization of applications. And finally, we're going to conclude with some examples from real applications of this in the real world. So my name is Raj Nair. As I said before, I am an entrepreneur. This is my third startup. I've been working on this project on Avesha, where we are focused entirely on multi-tenancy for Kubernetes. And it's been a great opportunity and love to share my experience with you. So let's start off with the definition of a tenant. So a tenant can be an enterprise team, or it could be a SaaS customer. It could also be a version of a software, for example, for an enterprise, which is created by multiple teams. Because we're going to show you how we can actually connect different teams, even on different clusters, with one tenant. With one tenancy, I should say. And then the idea is that multi-tenancy is when multiple customers, users, products, or teams are deployed in one environment. And they're physically together, but need to be logically separated or isolated. So a tenant can be a customer in a B2B SaaS. It could be as I said, a team. Now here are some examples. For example, in a company, you have many departments: marketing, operations, finance, and so on. Well, they could all be tenants and within the same cluster or multiple clusters. Or you could have a team or a product, and that could be in a tenant, and it could also be on a single cluster or multiple clusters. So why do we need this, right? What is the criticality of it? Well, the important thing is, of course, you get the efficiencies of not having to spin up clusters just for it to create the isolation and end up with a cluster sprawl, and that's pretty obvious. You can save money like that. But more importantly, you can also get application velocity, because what you're able to achieve with true multi-tenancy is this isolation in all aspects, so that now your teams or your tenants, they can rapidly innovate without impeding others. And that's the most important reason why you should focus on having multi-tenancy in your organization or in your deployment. Now, that brings us to another question, which is, how do you know what is true multi-tenancy? So let's start with what is not multi-tenancy. So, for example, in Kubernetes, all you have is the notion of a namespace, and that might help you to some extent. But it's not enough, because everything you need to not have commingled traffic. You need to have resource controls, and all of this has to be handled not only in a single cluster but on multiple clusters. So you can do this today manually, but it's error prone. This is not enough, right? So you'll have problems with noisy neighbor. You want to be able to get that true isolation. And for that, you need a better mechanism. And you need something where you can actually control all aspects of it, including the resources, the RBAC, the network, all of this in one place and through a single mechanism. So this is what we are attempting to do. Is in this talk, uh, we are talking about something called application slicing. So what is this? This means you are sharding a cluster or clusters, and that slice goes across either a single cluster or multiple clusters, but you have multiple slices. And this is the unit of tenancy or isolation. So, for example, what you get out of this is from you get isolation, you get observability, and you have the ability to extend that to a multi-cluster. This is the definition of a true multi-tenancy. And of course, what does isolation mean? That means you, on the network level and on a policy level, you're able to isolate. And observability means that you are able to have a way to observe, each tenant can observe their own portion of the infrastructure and essentially try to do it on a self-serve basis, creating a tenancy and you're not having to go through a IT department and so on. And finally, the ability to have a federation, meaning that you can take your slice and it can be across multiple clusters and they're all federated together. And obviously, by doing this, you get the efficiencies of not having to spin up multiple clusters. So that is like a very important principle and what we've called application slicing. And here are some details of how this might be implemented. For example, you could have the notion of a worker and a hub, and the worker is in each cluster, and where there's a CRD and an operator, slice operator, that essentially creates all of this automatically, gives you that mechanism, whether it's a policy controls, resource controls, whether it is the network isolation, the connectivity, all of this is taken care of by that slice worker. And then the services, microservices on all on the different clusters on the slice get advertised to the others in the same slice. And there's also a zero trust security that is enabled within that slice. So this gives you the network isolation, it gives you security, it gives you the ability to work across each other in the slice, and of course isolates it from other slices. And this is what you want. So the use cases of this are, for example, categorized under location, isolation, and reliability. Location in the sense that, let's say you need a location for low latency close to your customer, or you need to observe some jurisdiction, perhaps some regulatory compliance for GDPR or other rules, or you need to have, or there is a simple data gravity. You can't move that data because it's too much. So in all those cases, you need to have more than one cluster. And now with Kubernetes, it's completely manual. So this slice, on the other hand, will give you that ability to control that. Likewise, if you go from a performance standpoint or a governance standpoint, the same way. And then finally, when you look at reliability, let's say you have the need to have more than one location, for scaling or for upgrade reasons or whatever, or for just pure federation, you can easily do that once you have a slice, because now you're able to deploy this and manage it simply. And you can upgrade, for example, without disruption, because again, anything upgrade in a slice is contained in that slice, and so it doesn't affect anything else. So in conclusion, we have shown how application slicing can enable multi-tenancy for deploying deployments that span cloud providers, data centers, or edge locations, and enable the strategic placement of workloads anywhere around the world. We're going to look at a few actual examples that we have dealt with. So for example, if you take a single cluster, now here you have, say 3 engineering teams, one working on HR apps, one working on payroll apps, one working on hiring apps. So here, you essentially, what you're doing is you're providing this multi-tenancy using slices, and that can reduce your cost because you don't have to spin up separate clusters like currently is done for each and every one of these teams. And so it's much easier also to manage. And this is obviously, this can be deployed anywhere. So on any cloud providers or on bare metal or on prem, whatever is your particular situation. And the other case is where you have enterprise customers who are having multiple teams, which is sort of an extension of the last one, where they have these on different clusters, like a development cluster, a staging cluster, or a production cluster, where you do actually probably need that hard isolation. But then again, since you have these slices that go across them, you're able to actually control the isolation amongst those teams or between those teams, while at the same time they are actually deployed based on the level of maturity on different clusters, so that you get the benefit of both, and you get a uniform governance across all of these, and you get the team isolation. Then, of course, there is the case where you have the canary testing, where you have the really different release candidates, and you want to test them. You want that isolation, hard isolation between them, but at the same time, you want to have your teams access these and based on their, to access their particular portion of it. And so a slice is very useful for that. It will create the velocity because one team won't hinder or the progress of the others. At the same time, you get a much more sane way to manage this. And of course, finally, actually, a couple more. There's the case situation with where you have different versions of a software. Again, that could be deployed in different slices, where this is sort of the inverse of the previous case, where here you have teams, maybe they are located in different geographies. They have their own clusters, but you want to have the ability to have different versions of the software that, of course, goes across all of these teams, and then you create the isolation between these versions, so that then you can again increase your velocity. We're showing you essentially how flexible this mechanism can be to support various use cases. There's also the case where you have different enterprise customers that you want, who are maybe your SaaS customers, but again, your deployment is in multiple locations for various business reasons. So whether you want to have an edge clusters, you want a GCP cluster or something, or a data center cluster, you want to have then this ability to create this slices, so that all the enterprise A's traffic and so on is just contained in its own slice and isolated from B and C. And so that again will definitely increase your velocity and reduce your costs. Then we have also the situation where you have simply a large enterprise that just needs to be in multiple locations because of their size, and they want to create isolation between their teams, like their marketing teams or sales team or finance team. This can be easily done with this approach. So we've covered a variety of use cases, and hope you enjoyed this talk. Happy to connect with you if you have any questions, and please reach out. We'll be more than happy to explain to you this idea. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.